good to be back with you as we continue on through our Bible study in the book of Nehemiah, and we are using this resource right here, reConstruct. Wow, there's lots of white on the screen this morning, isn't there? reConstruct is the title of this study as we're walking through the book of Nehemiah, and this is the book of Nehemiah like you have never experienced it. If you'd like to join us in the study, receive all the resources, find more about who we are and how you can be involved, you can visit that URL right there, go.christtable.today/reconstruct. Go.christtable.today/reconstruct, and we would love to have you along with us as a part of this journey. Today we find ourselves now in the third chapter of Nehemiah, verses 1 through 32, which constitute the entirety of chapter 3. Now, if you have done pre-work on this Bible study here on day 6, then you might well be just a little overwhelmed, because this is a whole lot of verses, a whole lot of names, a whole lot of places. It's dense. It's the entire chapter, and it's one of the longest readings that we have throughout the entire 8 weeks of this study. But I don't want you to be overwhelmed. It's okay to skim. It's okay to jump over the names. It's okay to just kind of do a quick reading through it to see what is there, and then we'll point out for you what, for me, I think are some of the more important things in this text that we have today. And it might do us well to say that not everything that's in the Bible is of equal value or importance to us. The genealogies, the names, the places, it's not that they're unimportant, but it may not be as important as other things for us to focus on. So don't feel like you got to go through every verse in Scripture with a fine-toothed comb as though everything that's in there is something that you should memorize and be aware of and fully understand. It's okay to just simply come at it as you would essentially any other reading device, any other reading tool, any other book. And so with that said, let's dig in. We come to the first verse, and we will not read through all 32 verses together, but why don't we just kind of jump in the beginning, and then we'll see where it takes us today. Verse 1, then Eliashib, the high priest, which was a very important position, both religious, politically, leadership-wise, the high priest position, and other priests started to rebuild at the sheep gate. And so we are now at the point where Nehemiah's grand vision, his dream, is becoming a reality as the people began to put their hands together to build the wall, which must have been quite a moment for Nehemiah, quite a moment of feeling successful, quite a moment of feeling validated, and perhaps even a spiritual moment. We have the priests here beginning, and Nehemiah, as we have said, has certainly leaned upon this idea, this line, this tactic that God has been in support of the wall. And we've kind of been transparent with our contention, with my contention, that I don't think that God was in support of the wall, especially for the reasons that they wanted to build it. But either way, at this point, Nehemiah must be on cloud 9. So they dedicated it, this sheep gate, setting up its doors, building the wall as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and then the Tower of Hananel. So what we're going to have here is essentially a quick overview of all of the logistics and placement and who did all of the building. This is a survey of the situation. Verse 2, people from the town of Jericho worked next to them, and beyond them was Zachar, son of Imri. The fish gate was built by the sons of Hassanah. They laid the beams, set up its doors, and installed its bolts and its bars. Meremoth, son of Uriah and grandson of Hakaz, repaired the next section of the wall, and beside him were Meshullam, son of Berechiah and grandson of Meshezabel, and then Zadok, son of Banah. And as we continue, and I'll just kind of hit pause here, as we continue through this, what you're going to see essentially, I think, if I'm right here, 42 different sections of this wall around the city of Jerusalem are being owned by 42 different individuals or families or groups of people. And it's fascinating when you read through it, you really get a perception of there being a great deal of diversity among those who are a part of doing this. They're not all of the same social class. They're not all of the same family. They're not all of the same skill set. They're not all builders or construction people. This is an all hands on deck situation. And it's actually a bit impressive to see the diversity of all of those who are involved. Now, the variety of builders here we're seeing working side by side is absolutely striking. And sometimes they're identified by family, other times by profession or place of residence. Some were priests, which it's pretty impressive whenever you see a religious leader do something with their hands and actually get involved. That says a lot. Others were lay people. Some were rulers of districts, so the politicians were involved. Others were merchants, the store owners, the people who traded in order to barter and get resources into the city, and the city's resources, get those out to other places. What we see, though, is a diverse community that's well represented on the list that took part in the common task of building the wall. Now, what is great about this is it is bringing people together. And after a time of great trauma and drama, where people were taken into captivity, were split apart, were taken away from their normal relationships, from their normal interactions, from their normal day-to-day places of living and doing business, people would have been disjointed. They would have been distrustful of other people and uncertain of their place in the community. There probably would not have been much sense of community other than their shared sense of frustration and anger and maybe even PTSD at being held captive against their will in a place that wasn't their land, away from their homes and their cities and their lives. And so this is a very important key point in this, that each family is involved and each profession is involved. And it's interesting, if you read down through this list, what you see more often than not is the people who are involved in the building usually are involved in building the section of the wall that is closest to their home. Now, I guess in a practical sense, that makes some sense, in that it doesn't make much sense for me to be traveling to the neighborhood that you live in to build a wall closest to you, and you traveling to the neighborhood that I live in to build a wall that's closer to me. So logistically, that makes some sense, but also I think emotionally, that may make some sense as well. If people were not 100% in support, if their interest was not fully vested in the rebuilding of the wall, then it is quite a brilliant sales technique in order to say, you're rebuilding the section of the wall that's closest to your house. You certainly want to make sure that the section of the wall of protection that is closest to your house is safe. And so it allowed people, I think, to see the benefit to them by being involved. The downside, I think, to that may well have been, though, that it encouraged a bit of maybe individualism, or it could encourage a bit of individualism, where people are taking care of themselves in their mind rather than taking care of other people. It may well be that it would have been a better idea for me to go and build my neighbor's wall, and for my neighbor to come and build the section of wall that was closest to me, in a community that is probably very much wired at this moment in its history to be a take care of me, myself, and my family first. This a little bit reinforces that idea with them rather than reinforcing the idea of love of neighbor and support of neighbor. Now, I hit pause just before verse 5 because I think that verse 5 is I think it's a very key moment, and it's almost a moment that you might miss if you weren't paying too close attention to what was going on here. In verse 5, right in the middle of all of these names and lists of people who were involved in the construction, we see that next were the people from Tekoa, though their leaders refused to work with the construction supervisors. Now we have lists of what amounts to dozens and dozens and dozens of different families represented, professions represented, people who are from all walks of life, all backgrounds, a very different and diverse group of people, all kind of coming together to do this one common thing: rebuild a wall. But if you've ever worked with people and tried to bring people together, whether it be in a school situation, in your neighborhood, in a church situation, at work, even if you've tried to bring members of a larger family together in order to do something or to accomplish something, you understand that there are oftentimes that one or few holdouts who don't agree, don't want to be involved, disagree with what the outcome or the project is, and are just causing friction. And it sometimes often is that the individual who does that on one instance or one occurrence is always the person who does that, is always the squeaky wheel. Sometimes, but not always. And so it can become normal for us to discount that person. You're always like this. You're never on board. Or if it's outside of the normality for them, it might be a situation: everybody else is behind this. Why aren't you? How can you not be a proponent of this? Dissent. Dissent is difficult. Now, you don't know this necessarily from reading the passage, but the people from Tekoa, these people had not been taken into captivity. They had been allowed to remain in the land. And so it's fascinating that these individuals are not necessarily the ones who seem to be fully in support of rebuilding this wall. What that says to me, and if you have our guide for today on reConstruct, then this will not be a new idea for you. But for those of you who don't, I want to kind of point this out. What that says to me is that it is the people who were in captivity who were most interested in rebuilding the wall. And we will see that continue throughout the book of Nehemiah. Why? Was it because they were fearful of being invaded again? They were still occupied by the same people. There was really no chance of them being re-invaded because they had been conquered. Rebuilding a wall isn't going to keep Persia out. Persia is the most powerful nation, to use that terminology. Persia is the most powerful group on the planet at that time. And so it's not as though anybody was going to take control of the city away from Jerusalem. So being invaded really wasn't a reality and wasn't on the radar. So why are they rebuilding the wall? Well, part of it, as we've said, is they're rebuilding the wall to keep out to keep out people who are unlike them, people who don't worship their same God or who have caused them trouble in the past, but who now are all essentially brothers under the common umbrella of the Persian kingdom. But I think that there might be one other reason why they're interested in rebuilding the wall, and that is to give the middle finger to those who are from Persia, the oppressor. There is likely a lot of PTSD and anger and frustration, and rebuilding the city back to its former glory, even if it is unnecessary and even if it is unwise because it's counterproductive to what God's goal and intent is for them as a people, they still want to do in order to essentially say, we won or it's a draw. If the wall doesn't get rebuilt, then it is a constant reminder to them of their failure. And so I think that the wall is being championed by those who were taken into captivity primarily, and not those who did not have that experience. So what's the point? There's always going to be dissent, and there's certainly always going to be dissent and disagreement whenever you try to do something that is radical or revolutionary or large scale, but you don't have to be rebuilding a wall to experience difference of opinion, disagreement, and even dissent at the end of the day on trying to accomplish something. And at least here in U.S. America, oftentimes our mindset is that those who dissent or those who push back are out of line, are wrong, are stopping progress. We as Americans are all about pioneering and progress and moving forward as fast as we can, as far as we can. Don't stand in our way. But I think that in God's kingdom, it's important for us to always pay close attention to the dissenting opinion. You know, I'm rather fond of saying, if you've listened to me for any length of time, that the majority was always wrong in the Bible. Whenever there came up a vote or a group of people who were trying to decide to do something, the majority was always wrong. Does that mean the majority is always wrong, always and forever? No. But I think it is a key point for us to recognize that in the Bible, the majority was always wrong, and the dissenting opinion of the minority was often right or on the side of God. Not all dissent, not all minorities are wrong. In fact, I might even say that even if the dissenting opinion is wrong, there is truth oftentimes, if not always, somewhere in what they're saying or what they're pointing out. Now, the idea of dissent here in the U.S., we have relegated oftentimes to legal opinions, usually around the Supreme Court. Whatever group is in the minority will oftentimes write one or more dissenting opinions explaining why they disagree with the decision. Here, in this passage, the people of Tekoa are a dissenting opinion. And even though it does not in any way, shape, or form stop the wall, they are overwhelmingly outnumbered by the group that wants the wall to move forward. The truth of the matter is, they were likely right and were likely on God's side. And so when it comes to our dealings, especially our dealings in churches, places of faith, religious systems and situations, we should not so easily discount the dissenting opinion. It may well be that there be God. Until tomorrow, happy reading.